So if you thought that Takashi Sato, who's on a 3-fight losing streak, taking on Themba Gorimbo, who's lost 1 in the UFC, I said that was a do-or-die fight at welterweight. I think even if Gorimbo loses 2, that's it. When I look at this fight, Matt, this is do or die, and Nick Fiore's in the same circumstance. I mean, he did just make his pro debut on incredibly short notice, taking on Mateusz Rebecki. Now that one... that was both of their debuts, and Fiore, for what it was worth, taking that fight, and I want to make sure that I get it right. Like, that was really, really, really short notice when he took on Rebecki. But, I mean, you consider the matchup there. Fiore was a lot bigger in the fight. You had a Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup, and Fiore burnt really hot in the first 2.5 minutes of the first round. And then he kind of petered off. But it didn't look like the Fiore that we knew, that we saw in the regional scene. And that's kind of the thing about Nick Fiore. Nick Fiore's one of those guys that had to beat Jay Ellis twice on the regional scene, fought all of his pro fights on the regional scene with Combat Zone, which is his teammate Calvin Kattar's promotion. And the craziest part about the Nick Fiore fight against Mateusz Rebecki was the commentary team didn't watch any of his previous fights because he kept saying, why isn't he throwing the jab like all of his teammates at the New England Cartel? Because you silly fools, he doesn't throw the jab. He's out of, he's a BJJ black belt out of Henzo Gracie, New Hampshire. And if you watch any of the tape on the regional scene, Fiore throws big bombs to close the distance, to get a double leg, to get you down, to roll you onto your back, and either get the rear naked choke or try and go for a TKO.
But that's why this is one of those fights where it's like, okay, Chase, if you don't win this, I don't really know where we're going. And it has been a disservice to the career of Chase Hooper up until this point because he was a young prospect who got pushed too early. And the problem is, in pro MMA, like, once you go pro and make it to the UFC, you can't, like, go back and get a bunch of amateur fights. Like, you are a big name. You're going to kind of get feasted on these bigger events. So, for Hooper, even though I do feel like he has made improvements, and that's the problem, he was so green when he started out against brother of David Tamer, Daniel Tamer, that he's still, the positives are there, right? Like, he's more of a machete than he is a Swiss Army knife. His strength is the grappling. He's going to want to get you down. He's a heavy presence on top, and you can tell that just by looking at him. We have it here. He's 6'1" for the division. He's huge. He looks like he could be 7'1". He is in the build of a Cole Miller type. So for Hooper, it just would be nice if he could kind of do the Brian Ortega progression of skill sets, right? It goes, be deadly with your jiu-jitsu, then add the boxing, and then add the counters to your boxing, add elbows. Now, I know that took him years to do, and he had a layoff. It might have been due to USADA and drug step, but that doesn't matter. You just know that he was able to take the time off, make the improvements, and that's what matters over time. For Hooper, he's been able to make those improvements. It's just, again, if you can't beat Nick Fiore in this fight, what are we doing? Because I do think the grappling of Nick is going to make this a difficult matchup. Like, Hooper has a grappling advantage in a lot of these MMA matches he is in, but he probably will still have it in this one. Let's be fair. Chase Hooper gets the top position in this fight. He has good ground and pound. He does have good durability for a grappler. I think he can make this a very difficult fight, but if Nick was able to match him on the mat, I wouldn't be completely surprised whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you see Nick Fiore as recently as 2021 really competing in a lot of grappling jiu-jitsu tournaments. I mean, Enigma grand opening BJJ champ, Enigma, Nick Fiore. But when you do look at it, I mean, Fiore's definitely one of those killer be killed type of strikers. Chase Hooper, so many people in our comment section were excited when he's been training out of Upstate Karate for some of these recent matchups, but his striking didn't progress, or he tried the Chrome Gracie of, I'm just going to go out there and strike like he did against Cub Swanson, and Hooper really struggled against Steve Garcia's last time out. Got dropped 3 times, TKO standing, and I mean, so for Hooper, getting ready for this one, you can see it there on the screen, training back at home in Washington State at Combat Sport and Fitness, and if you do look at it for Chase Hooper, 3-3 in the UFC so far. Super chat from Pablo Zaragoza saying, how excited are you for Tough 31? You're watching, right? Matt's not excited at all, and I haven't even chatted with him about it. I'm kind of excited. But
The Ultimate Fighter hasn't produced great fighters as of late. That's just, like, even the winners, I think it's fair to say they haven't met these crazy expectations.
But when it does come down to it, again, both guys are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu aces. Fiore took that fight on a couple weeks' notice. Rebecki would have beaten Chase Hooper more easily, I think, than Fiore, who came in on 2 weeks' notice. But again, this fight is at lightweight. It's not at featherweight. So Chase Hooper coming up to 155.
I still think he's going to be big, though.
This is his first UFC contest at lightweight. He was 4-0 to start his pro career there, was Chase Hooper. 5-0 as an amateur at 155 was Chase Hooper. So it is a very interesting fight that way. But again, when it does come to Fiore, the pro opponent, the combined opponent record of the pros that he faced before he came into the UFC, 61-234. He was not beating good fighters.
Shayla makes up a lot of that.
So when we have a look at this one, Matt, we're going to throw it on over to Tapology. Hooper versus Fiore. The odds on this one, Chase Hooper, slight favorite, but they're basically a par. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Matt, surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say over under 70% for the dream, Chase Hooper.
I'll say under, but I think it'll be the favorite.
It is under 966 total votes, 62% Hooper, 23% by decision, 68% by submission. For the 38% that have Fiore, 48% by knockout. Like to hear from the commenters here. I mean, fresh gamble saying Hooper does have a TKO, to be fair. And Buffo the Beast is saying, how dare you slander Juliana Miller, the tough champ. Bob Collins watched tape last night on this fight. Fury is a... We don't say that word here.
That's like Voldemort around here.
That is a tough word here. For the fans that are listening on the pod version, which is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we're not saying what you turn on your door before you go to bed to keep the baddies out. But Matt, when it does come down to this matchup,
I've got Chase Hooper. I don't love the pick, honestly. I just think the top pressure is going to be a big enough key. I think it can secure moments and secure minutes in that position. So if it doesn't end inside the distance, and either guy could go out there and get a submission win, I can fully admit that. But I just think if it goes to a decision, I can see Hooper being in the more dominant positions on the mat. And for that reason, I do favor him ever so slightly in the matchup.
Chase Hooper's record is what it is at this point. I mean, you've seen it earlier.
I don't think either guy's fighting for a UFC title.
No, and I was not that hyped on Nick Fiore coming into the UFC because he's not like anybody else at the New England Cartel. He's more like Joe Lozon, but even Joe Lozon has basic boxing combinations, then get his wrestling going.
Surprising pop.
Nick Fiore has decent wrestling from what I've seen against lesser levels of competition, and he took Mateusz Rambesky by surprise and took him down in that matchup, a guy that trains at ATT with some of the best. Chase Hooper doesn't have the wrestling entries that Nick Fiore has, but he does have the scramble ability. For me, I think Nick Fiore is going to be the bigger fighter in this one at 155. I could be wrong on that one, but like how Steven Peterson was able to stay on top and control Chase Hooper for large periods of time, I think Nick Fiore can do the same. So for me, I'm going with Nick Fiore. Matt's going with Chase Hooper. But yeah, again, let us know who you have down there below in the comments section. Next fight coming up on this card, it's a doozy. Ilir Latifi main evented his debut against Gegard Mousasi. He's taking on Rodrigo and Nascimento next. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks.